there are some absolutely huge and ginormous changes coming to Diablo 4, and let's hope that this fixes and makes the game so much better.
The big question today is this: when are we finally getting that big balance patch that's been looming over us for a while now? We've had hot fixes and small changes day after day after day, and then some.
I would like to say no one should give Blizzard any credit for making hot fixes and small changes, because most of those hot fixes should have never been there in the first place, because that should have been fixed before the game was released. And those small changes, same literal thing. And let's not forget that they are not fixing the game fast enough. They are not making gen tabs. They're not doing a lot of things. At least they're balancing the game, and that's important. So let's hope.
Suddenly all of that stopped, and it's felt like a big balance patch with a lot of that put together into one patch seems to be coming, and it really seems like that's going to be this Tuesday, the 27th. As displayed on the launcher, both Monday and Tuesday will have live maintenances. Further, we have this really hopeful and exciting tweet from Adam Fletcher, the global community developer director for the game. The awaited patch that we're looking for is coming, quote, very soon, as of June 25th, which is Sunday. And also, we generally expect Tuesdays as the patch days based on the history of the game so far, and with a major maintenance occurring over 2 days ending on the Tuesday itself, well, it looks very likely. A neat aspect of these maintenance is that the game will actually be, more unstable than normal, but will still run. You'll still be able to play. You won't be locked.
By the way, it's currently Tuesday, and haven't seen any of that currently, so we're still waiting.
Out of the game, as also confirmed by Adam Fletcher. So nothing is confirmed, but they continuously skirt around the topic without direct confirmations, but heavily suggest it at this point. I don't know, do they do this as a way to protect themselves, like maybe if there's a delay or something? That patch is apparently 13 pages long, which is certainly a lot bigger than anything else we've seen for balance or changes for the game so far. But either way, a balance patch is coming and is pretty overdue at this point. Whether it's Tuesday or not, what are we expecting? As discussed in
are we finally gonna get female druids actually, like, playable? Because, no one currently wants to click on that disgusting creature feature that is called female druid, okay? Blizzard, how about you get on that one, okay? So we can play female druids and not feel repulsed by ourselves.
Various forms by the dev team. Buffs are coming. So far, they've been much more on the nerf side of things with the changes, and they have acknowledged that. I'd recommend the full fireside chat that they did, but the general gist is that buffing has, wider-reaching consequences, often unintended, compared to, say, nerfing. So they've been a lot more careful.
That is true, but that is something that most game developers can't actually keep up. At some point, they're gonna buff things, because nerfing feels bad for the player base, and the player base literally hate when stuff like this happens. Also, there are some things that they could have buffed. For example, dungeon experience, not nerf it into the ground for no reason whatsoever.
In testing before letting those land, and I think that's fair enough. With those buffs coming, what is it we're actually expecting? Which classes and why? I'll tell you what I want buffed. The stash. Give me 10 times the amount of slots and put it in game immediately. Yes. I have 6 bank characters just to make space. And
we want something. We want a system where you when you disenchant, you extract an affix from, legendary affix from an item, and it goes into a special stash location where it's gonna be random when you apply it to an item how good the roll is, and it doesn't take a space.
And honestly, it's really dumb. There's no good reason for that. But aside from that and my saltiness, let's talk about what we expect and hope for in this upcoming balance patch. The number one obvious and confirmed buff is the Nightmare Dungeons and their value. As they've made it crystal clear, they want us to run Nightmare Dungeons as the end game and not really like regular dungeons for better time to XP.
Also, Nightmare Dungeons make absolutely no sense as a concept, because this is what's happening in Nightmare Dungeons currently. You play Nightmare Dungeons that are... Any Nightmare Dungeon that you play that is 3 levels above your level is inefficient. And there is no reward for actually doing the highest tier Nightmare Dungeon that you have. If you're doing anything where the average mob level is 3 levels above you, you are actually actively hurting yourself. That is the stupidest thing ever.
They repeatedly nerfed that to prevent that. The problem so far with that is they've done a pretty poor job of incentivizing them properly, you know, ruining everything else to push it into something that's just okay, doesn't feel great. And you know, some of the benefits of Nightmare Dungeons weren't even explained to us in-game. Like, did you know that Nightmare Dungeons have a much higher rate for sacred and ancestral drops? We learned that one via Twitter, again as a random reveal by the associate game director. These things really should be listed and told to you in-game, maybe like when you're looking at world tiers referencing the dungeons, I don't know. But in any case, the Nightmare Dungeons need to have more value than other content if they want to encourage players to engage with them. Right? They've confirmed that they're increasing the XP for these generally, which is a good first step, but I'd also like to see other changes like greater elite density, maybe make the legendary or unique drops better the higher tier dungeons you do to actually encourage that beyond.
Shorten the distance you need to run at the start of the dungeon before you actually encounter anything, because it is so annoying, honestly, in my opinion, that I need to spend like, I don't know, 30 seconds to run from the start of the dungeon because nothing is there. It's so unbelievably, unreasonably unnecessary. And that the same thing happens in the second part of the dungeon when you start it. You need to just spend like 30 seconds running for no reason. There's no encounters, there's no nothing.
On just glyph XP, which just isn't good enough. We also know we're going to eventually get a teleport to active Nightmare Dungeons, which will be a nice quality of life, but I'm not sure if that'll come in this patch. What we do know is Nightmare Dungeons are getting buffs and improvements, and I'm very interested to see what the scope of that is, and I really hope it's more than just, hey, they give you more XP. But what about the classes? It's fair to say that all classes could do with some buffs. What I mean by that is the incredibly underused abilities, skills, passives every class has. There's a couple meta builds per class, some with more options than others, due to the raw power and relevance of the aspects and abilities.
I don't know how I feel about buffing everything, because the reality is almost everything in the game is currently overpowered. People just don't gravitate it because it's harder to figure out, it's harder to make. For example, the 100 Lilith sorceress skill is a Blizzard build. No one plays Blizzard. I didn't even know anything but ice shards existed. This guy just puts everything on that makes Blizzard stronger. And then he literally just one-shots Lilith. No, he seriously does. He stuns her, and in 1 5-second stun duration, she's gone. She's literally gone. Deleted, yeeted, and deleted, boys. It is insanity. You know? So, do we actually need to buff things that are underutilized? Maybe summons in general, because for every class, summons currently feel like the absolute weak sauce of the weak sauce fest. But other than that, I don't know. Maybe we're just gonna unlock something completely broken by buffing things that are underutilized.
Abilities and skills tied to that build. Compared to that, there's very clear variance in power of abilities overall. Take the Blood Necromancer as a good example, one that I played around with. I wanted to make the Blood Wave Ultimate work. They even buffed it in the one patch we've seen so far for that. The reality is every Necromancer build is probably and really should be using the Bone Storm Ultimate, because it provides
so easy
damage over time, damage reduction, massive.
By the way, I play a Necromancer main. You can actually make this blood thing ridiculously consistent and easy and almost barely spammable. It has the same uptime as the bone thing, but the difference is it actually deals more damage, but the huge but why Blood Wave is actually non-usable is to make it usable, you need 2 legendary enchantments for it. One, that it repeats the Blood Wave 2 times for 100% more damage. Every additional wave deals 50% less damage, but that's, you know, pretty much like 100 or something like that % damage increase. And the second is it leaves behind a dot on the ground that does also like pretty huge damage. That thing is insanely powerful. It literally can wipe a room instantaneously with just one button press. Feels good, and if you play it correctly with Lucky Hit, you can actually make its cooldown like, 10 seconds on average, right? That's how far you can go with it. But admittedly, that's a shadow build, not an actual blood build. And the big downside is you need 2 enchantments to make that thing happen. Bone Storm requires just one to make it happen for a minion build, for a shadow build, for pretty much anything, or 0 enchantments if you're a Bone build. So, yeah, Bone Storm is just better because the enchantments it uses is either 0 or a 1. While the Blood Wave requires you and forces you into 2 separate enchantment usages, which is just sad.
If crit chance increases while active, you can use aspects to give it a massive shield or make it last longer, even alter the type of damage it does for the Shadow Blight build. All of that in one ultimate. Meanwhile, the Blood Wave deals low damage and there's a knockback, and we can get an aspect to make it fire off multiple times, but the multiples deal much less damage. So obviously the Bone Storm is a better ability. There's a lot more going on for it. This applies to all.
And if you're playing Lucky Strike Bone Storm with Decrep, by the way, if you're using the enchantment that makes Bone Storm last like 5 to 10 seconds more per corpse consumed, you can actually just have it with Lucky Hit Decrep builds on 100% of the time. Which feels good, by the way. It feels super good.
All classes and so many abilities that aren't used because they're so weak by comparison. I mean, look at Barbarians as a top tier example. All of their builds are using the same 3 shouts because they're simply so good, nothing else can be taken. The Sorcerers are much the same, with using the same abilities with a tiny variety in their 1 or 2 abilities based on the build changes. And the way the current balance is, it ultimately just leads to
I'm gonna make a source soon, so I don't know how I feel about that.
Certain few meta setups and their slight changes. What a waste it is to have so many interesting abilities, passive playstyles and so on that are underused or not played at all because they're so underpowered. This is where we expect some relevant buffs in this patch, and that's going to shift up the meta, which is going to be very interesting. What about class mechanic changes? Is there any hope for that? Well, we don't know. They've not really confirmed that. But it's something that, say, sorcerers are praying for. As the most popular class in Diablo 4, according to Blizzard themselves, it's rated the weakest class overall in the true endgame. To be clear, all classes do great in the endgame, but compared to one another, sorcerer is having some clear problems.
Bone Necro is completely out of this world, and Barbarian with Whirlwind is also kind of out of this world damage-wise.
A major aspect is their extreme squishiness, and this could in fact be very much
Dude, what is this build? Look at this.
That aren't working correctly, as stated by Blizzard themselves.
Yo.
They're not providing enough impact to your survivability, and perhaps in the very design of sorcerers, they're meant to rely on element resists, but they're not working properly. They get a ton of it from their main stat, intelligence, and their general defensives being element related, but it just doesn't play much of a role currently. According to Blizzard, they're hoping to get those reworked and much more impactful in Season 2. Not Season 1, Season 2. And that's not...
I don't understand how elemental resistance works fully, but I can say this. When you equip an item that has 40% plus resistance to, like, for example, lightning, fire, or whatever, if that mechanic previously did moderate damage to you, it no longer does it. Okay? It no longer does it. Admittedly, I think we should nerf the creatures that deal damage. For example, what's the worst combination of creatures that that can just one-shot you in Diablo 4? It's any of these creatures that just lunge at you, plus with the stupid cold enchantment that makes 3 explosions. That thing just one-shots you. If you do not have specific... If you're specifically not going into some kind of survivability through some kind of legendaries or whatever, that thing is just deleting you out of this world. It's so stupid.
Happening anytime soon, basically. But there's other aspects of issues here, like the class demanding so much commitment to be able to run anything tied to mana, which feels kind of lame for the concept of a sorcerer casting spells. One of the main meta options has you jump in and fight at melee, which is just funny. Or what about the enchantments, the class's main passive? You have this variety of options to create like different combinations conceptually, but the reality
there's
is
probably
the Firebolt
just one
enchantment has so much impact that it's sort of illusion of choice. By setting enemies on fire, there's many perks that you can work into that concept that end up forcing sorcerers to lean into that because it's so impactful. Without some kind of improvement to the other options, that issue is just going to continue. I've heard and seen a good amount of calls for give us a 3rd enchantment slot as an alternative solution to buffing the other enchantments, but that might go a bit too far in
No.
potential. On the other hand, in terms of class mechanic changes, Necromancer. It's a funny one because I'm a Necromancer main, right? And I think the class is very strong. And I honestly think Necromancer is one of the strongest classes right now.
We are the only class that can make a build that requires 0 resource spending, and it absolutely slaps. Everyone who's using Blight is just, I think that you're doing it incorrectly. Instead of Blight, you can use Shadow Mist. No, Blood Mist, excuse me. You can use Blood Mist with Decrep. And that means that Blood Mist will pretty much always be off cooldown. That means your other skills are going to be always off cooldown. And what kind of... he's using the right skeletons. And with 6 skeletons, six melee skeletons that have a 20% chance of spawning a corpse, you don't really want to use this blight stuff. You just want to spam corpse explosion. Okay, that's what you want to do.
Current meta builds, but I also think it's one of the worst, if not the worst, classes conceptually. Our current necromancers are sacrificing all their minions to actually be strong, which is hilarious. A necromancer who revives the dead to use them for their purposes. In all the pre-release content, the cinematics and so on, the necromancer is, you know, summoning the dead. But in Diablo 4, it's only a niche specific build that has real issues and weaker output, survivability problems, you know, compared to the actual meta builds that is using minions. I think mechanically it's the fact that summons take up too many ability slots. I can understand one ability slot, right? But 2 is too much when we only have 6 slots, and that's barely enough for normal builds. On the other hand, the sacrifices provide so much benefit. You know, like major vulnerability options, extreme crit damage increases, crit chance, shadow damage improvements, and so on, while having minions does not provide comparable benefits in any way. Now, I'm no dev or balance team working and testing these concepts out. Whatever I'm suggesting is not really going to be a straightforward fix. I know that, and I'm not claiming that I have the answers. I think it's a complicated thing, and so I'm hopeful that they've tried some things and found a solution.
He's using the skeletons that give invulnerable when they freeze things.
Beyond just making like minions deal more damage or something. And yes, the Blight, Shadow, Corpse explosion of Necromancer, the VFX of that is super obnoxious.
Yep.
And we would love to see that change where, you know, it doesn't stack the VFX
now,
so you
Blizzard,
can see
by the
nothing
way,
inside
now.
of it. A very simple concept, but maybe hard to implement. But on the other hand, it's a joke that Necromancer is so painfully slow to play. I'm honestly offended when I swap between my rogue and necromancer that my rogue is just walking at double the speed passively to begin with. Why are necromancers so slow? Every class except necromancer has incredible mobility options. But
I said this already previously. The only... If you find boots that are a 300% upgrade stat-wise to your necromancer, but they don't have movement speed on them, they're garbage. The only boots a necromancer can ever wear is plus movement speed. Otherwise, you're just living the sad life.
But necromancer, nah, man, we just walking around like a slug. We'll catch up eventually. So yeah, I really hope they give necromancers some sort of way to move around faster. Something at all. But that baby rage aside, those are some of the things that I'm hoping for, as well as the very few confirmed things we have currently. We're really hoping that it happens this Tuesday, because obviously we all want to test this out and get into a new meta well before Season 1 actually hits and changes and resets everything anyway. Time will tell, but let us know in the comments what you're hoping for. Maybe
I'm hoping for the fact that Blizzard just steals all the crafting ideas from Path of Exile, and we can have a really interesting game.
Maybe when it comes to the game as a whole, or maybe just specifically your class. But for now, I've been Hollow, you've been you, thanks for watching, we'll see you next time.
Nice. Very good video.
Josh.
Wait, is this a bug? Yeah, it's a bug. He doesn't have the thing where, you know. In any case, that's Rage Gaming Videos. Good stuff right there, boys. Anyway, this was Citizen. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.